Welcome. Today we're going to get into creating image in text. As you can see from the example, we're going to use a tropical image inside the words Hawaii Paradise to create the illusion that the image is inside the text itself. To do this, we're going to be using Adobe Photoshop. To begin, we want to start out with a background image. With our background image, we're going to look to duplicate out the layer. I can go over to the Layers panel, right-click on the layer, and duplicate the layer. Once duplicated, we're going to go down to the bottom of our Layers panel and click on Create New Layer. With this layer, this is going to be either a white or a gradient that we can consider using. To fill this area in, I'm going to do a gradient for this example. But I'm going to go over to the gradient tool in the left side navigation, located where the paint bucket tool is. And I currently already have a blue to white gradient already set up, in which I can click and drag to create that gradient that's going to sit over top of the image. If I want to modify it in any way, I can always click and drag from a new area to get a different variation, or get into changing the color by clicking on the sample and adjusting the gradient to my preference. But for now that I have the gradient, I'm going to move this layer underneath of our background copy. And now we're going to get into adding our text. For our text, we're going to go over to our Type tool, the capital T icon on the left side navigation. And I'm going to make my text box big enough that it kind of covers the entire area. If your text is too large, we can scale it down. I can click and drag on the capital T's icon at the top navigation to shrink it down just so we can see it a little bit better. Just so you can see it, I'm going to center my text, and we're going to change this out to Hawaii Paradise in all capital letters. If you accidentally erased out or did not erase out all the text, just quadruple click and you can hit backspace to clear out the area. So again, I'm going to type in Hawaii Paradise. Make sure to hit enter after you type in Hawaii, so Paradise will appear on the line below. With the text, we want to take up as much space as possible. If you do not have the font, I downloaded this font called Flower off of defont.com, also known as Flower Bold, but consider to bring in an outside font to create a little bit more interest or connect to the background that you're using. But I want to fill out the area as much as possible with the letters, so I'm going to look to select out over Hawaii so I can scale this up. I can either go over to my right side navigation where I can adjust on the properties panel, or along the top navigation. Right now you can see that my text size is about 296, but I'm going to actually adjust this up probably at about 430 or so, just so it's filling out all the way to the width of Paradise. And if I want to scale out Paradise a little bit more, again, just click and drag on the T icon, and we can scale it up to fill as much space as possible. You may want to make tweaks to your text. If you don't like this font, you can always choose another font, but I do recommend you find a capitalized font that has width to it. If you don't have weight to the actual text, thin variations will not reveal the image inside well. But if I do want to make any type of modification, I am going to look to condense the space, the lettings between Hawaii and Paradise. If I want to adjust the leading, I'm going to select over Paradise. And I'm going to go over to the leading icon, the A stacked on top of the other A. We can see set leading. And I can again click and drag on the AA icon to adjust them closer together. Now that we have these scaled out, we're going to look to adjust the placement of our text so that it is sitting below our background copy. To create the image in text, we need to make sure that the text is below the image itself. And then once behind the image, we are going to right-click on the background copy, and we are going to go down to Create Clipping Mask. When I click on Create Clipping Mask, the text blanks out all the additional area outside, leaving us with just the text, or with the image inside the text itself. To create a little bit more attention or interest on the image, I'm going to look to add in a drop shadow and probably an outline so it stands out from the background. To do this, we want to select on the type layer. With the type layer selected, I go down to FX at the bottom of the layers panel, or we can double click on the layer itself to bring up our layer style panel. First, we're going to go over to our stroke. With our stroke right now, my color is set to blue. I'm going to adjust this out to more of a pinkish tone, and we can always adjust this later on, but I want something a little bit more vivid, a little bit brighter, just so it stands out and allows the background to stand out on its own. Then I'm going to go over to our drop shadow over on the bottom left. And with the stroke, I can adjust the width if I want a little bit more weight to it. I do recommend that you put the stroke on the outside of the object, but I wouldn't necessarily go too high with the overall size. I'm going to keep it to 6 for mine. And then down to the drop shadow to give myself separation from the background, or the gradient as is. With the gradient, I'm going to look to adjust the distance just a little bit. And I can push the size to just get a little bit of blur so it is separating from the background. If you want to reduce the opacity, if it's too strong, you can reduce the opacity. But I'm just looking for a better separation from the background as of right now. Feel free to adjust to your own settings. But once I have my stroke and I have my drop shadow, I'm all done with my layer style. I click OK. The reason why we do have this gradient sitting behind and the background down below, for the gradient, I'm going to allow it to give better separation from the original image. For the original image though, if I were to hide my gradient for a moment, click on the eye icon to make it disappear, you can see that it takes away the separation of what's happening to the image. But for the background layer, we're going to actually turn it to grayscale. The shortcut key for doing this is Command-Shift-U, or on a PC, Control-Shift-U. When I hit this, it will turn our background into a black and white image. So this gives us a lot better separation, and you can definitely keep it like this if you choose so. But I am going to add a gradient just to bring in a little bit more color, but I'm going to drop the gradient opacity so I'm getting some variation of the background, allowing us to continue our imagination outside the letters themselves. Once I do have my text with the image and text clipping mask, I'm going to select on my Hawaii Paradise layer the text, and we're going to look to highlight and click on the type tool and make sure to select over top of the text box so we have it selected. At the top navigation, we're going to take a look at adding in a warped feature. We can see this T with a little arc line underneath. I'm going to click on this, and we're going to switch this over to a wave distribution. If the text is too large, we can always get into scaling this, but I can tweak the direction that the wave effect will apply. For right now, I'm just going to make mine about -37 or so. I feel like that's good for my design. It will give me some space that I can work with, and I can adjust as needed. These settings are good for the overall composition. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to scale this down just to make sure all the text fits. If I do want to scale down the size of the text, I can always hit Command or Control T. That brings up my transform tool, and I can grab a side or up corner and scale it down a little bit to fit better onto the page. Because I'm hitting Control or hitting the transform on the type layer, it's not affecting the original background image or affecting the image inside the text. It's only affecting the text itself. So I can make it what I want. The final step to this is adding a third element, an element that stands out or connects to the overall message. We're going to look to pull in a tropical flower just to bring in some interest and break up just the text with the background. I've already gathered the image, and I can click and drag to bring it in. Make sure that we are on a layer above the background copy. And we can see this nice little flower picture that we can hide in the bottom left corner or just use as a little featurette for the overall composition. Just helps to break up the elements, and I can consider adding in a drop shadow as well for this image. So I'm going to go down to FX, go down to the drop shadow, and just adding a little bit of shadow so it stands out and it's not flat. So once I click OK, we have our Hawaii paradise. We have another third element to make it a little bit more interesting. And we've now created a composition of image and text. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you again soon.